Something green has taken root between the fruit orchards and vineyards of the Paarl Valley, and it's a complete, sustainable, forward-looking approach to children's learning, guided by Head of School Andy Wood.
So there's a really innovative school in Bali called Green School Bali, which has been running since about 2008, doing some wonderfully innovative work in education. And a local family, Alba and Herman Brunt, went over to Bali and enrolled their 3 daughters in Green School Bali. And they had just such a wonderful experience there that they came back to South Africa and decided, we've got to start Green School South Africa. So it's born of one family's passion for education, and it's a passion project.
Taking education back to basics, they use a child's natural curiosity to drive learning.
The traditional education system is very much about downloading lots of content and information in order to prepare children to write a very big test at the end of the week or the end of the term. We're much more about saying, why is this information worth knowing? How would we research it? Let's get some questions which would guide our learning journey. At the end of it, assess how well we answer those questions.
With children energized by healthy vegetarian dishes, Head of Primary, Esby Benadal, offers them food for thought.
In our values, we've got an acronym for it. It's called I Respect. So it's an acronym for integrity, responsibility, equity, sustainability, peace, empathy, community, and trust. So at the moment with the grade 1s, we read Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, and then we referenced things to our values. And it was phenomenal to see 6 and 7-year-olds be able to identify, this is an example of trust. He trusted people who were with him. He showed integrity by always doing the right thing even when nobody was watching, and inviting his prison guard to come to the inauguration of when he became president. It's amazing to be able to put these things in context for the kids.
Preparing the youth for a changing, challenging world, the campus is green, as are the school's habits and entire curriculum.
So the school has been very, very carefully designed according to the living building standards. And essentially we generate our own solar power, we harvest our own rainwater. The school grounds are a garden, and we've got vegetables here and fruit being grown. Most days, groups of children are out in the garden and they're busy planting the seeds and the vegetables, or might be harvesting them. And they really do then, from that, take them to the kitchen. And so it's a real seed to table journey. And after lunch, they put all their scraps in the little bin, take them down to the compost heap, gets made into compost, comes back to the garden. And there's so much learning that happens in that process.
While kids learn, the campus generates its own electricity and gives back to the grid. It uses less water than it receives in rainfall. And then there's what Dani Steenkamp has done with the landscape.
The starting point of this design was, it had to be green. We had to really consider the environment when we planned and installed this landscape. And also a new thing for us was just creating gardens and a landscape for children. So as a large part of the plants that we used here are the local Renosterveld, a plant group that's very threatened. The school grounds, it's about 7 hectares, and closer to the buildings we use things with lots of fragrance and things with interesting textures, and vegetable gardens in the kind of the heart and the center of the school. The garden is very influenced by how children would use this space. I visited the site with my 2 boys on weekends and to see how they use this space and see where they run, where we need pathways. So yeah, that was a big part of it. So it's very informal and obviously really environmentally friendly.
Taking it next level, architects Wessel van Dijk and Tiana Stoltz designed the buildings to mimic boulders in the nearby Berg River.
I think the main concept for the school was to build a school in this beautiful Franschhoek and Paarl Valley, really inspired by the beautiful mountains around us, the boulders of the Berg River, and really the school mimics that natural form. If you look at the buildings behind us, they sit very nicely in the landscape, and we created a sort of a miniature version of the Franschhoek Paarl Valley.
Not just a sustainable campus, it's regenerative as well. So basically putting in more than it's taking, generating energy, purifying water, recycling resources, and conserving the biodiversity.
The most important thing for me is to see the kids playing. You can hear them in the background, and that they actually interact with the landscaping. They're not class-bound. Most of the teaching, or in some cases, all of the teaching happens outside. And I think that's, for me, that's the beauty of it, where we created a space for that.
Large leaf-like roof structures collect rainwater, and inside, interior architect Andrea Hofmeyer has had the happiest challenge of her life.
Our design brief was by far the most interesting and intriguing I have ever seen. For the first time, we're asked to do an interior design for a school. And not just any school, a school on the cutting edge of both education and sustainability. So the sustainability guidelines that were given to us as part of our brief really did guide our design process. And instead of starting with how the design was going to look, we started by looking at what was available in our local context. So as part of our brief, we had to look within a 50-kilometer radius of our site and source materials that were available locally, and then we started moving out of that 50-kilometer radius. We chose our materials. You can see in the color palette the lime plaster of the walls, the natural timber joinery, the very natural looking floors, and we found a very earthy palette that we could work with and things that we could source locally. And then we began pioneering and changing how we used those materials and coming up with innovative design solutions that we had really never thought of before.
Furniture was custom designed, made locally and wherever possible in the immediate area.
As part of the interior design brief also was to introduce an element of playfulness into the spaces. Being a school, we wanted to engage students in the surfaces, whether it would be wanting them to touch walls or climb shelves or be able to read books in a reading nook. And then we also have the beautiful glass wall, which is actually a diagram of the southern sky. And whether it's something that is literally interpreted or not, it's just lovely to introduce something of nature into interior design and give it a unique spin.
All this to create a generation of informed and aware young people to help steer things in the right direction.
So we're doing something really innovative in education here, in that we're not only teaching content, but we're teaching skills and attitudes and values. We're about creating a real love of nature and love of the environment, in the sense that children can be a force for good and a force for positive change in the world. And we're about producing optimists and idealists.
It is a thorough approach, but at heart, it's about getting back to the basics of working with planet Earth and not against her. Get more of the Insider Essay online. Follow, connect, engage, and be inspired to live better with the Insider Essay. Watch the show Monday evenings at 6. Repeat Saturday at 1 on S3.